So first off, hi everyone, I'm Jasmine Martinez and I'm with the Central Valley Air Quality Coalition, or CVAQ, and CVAQ works on advocating for clean air in the San Joaquin Valley. We do this by working together with dozens of organizations in the Valley who are focused on environmental justice, and we work on air quality education and campaigns to hold local and regional agencies accountable to public health. With any of these webinars, we always like to start with some basics, and we call this our Air Pollution 101s. And to start off, I did want to share about two of the top pollutants that we see in the San Joaquin Valley, which are particulate matter, or PM, and ozone. And these are some of the main pollutants we see and some of the most hazardous to our health. They cause numerous heart and lung problems, and have been linked to other diseases such as cancer. PM comes in many different sizes, and one of the most dangerous and smallest is PM 2.5. It is about 30 times smaller than a single strand of hair, as demonstrated by this image on the top right. Some of the populations that are most at risk to this pollution are known as sensitive populations. These are pregnant women, children, people over the age of 65, those with pre-existing heart and lung conditions, and outdoor workers who are consistently exposed to that bad air. The San Joaquin Valley is one of the most polluted air basins in the country, and for particulate matter. And this is largely due to the economy that we have here, and the industries that we do have. And those three are development, oil and gas, and agriculture. And we will be talking about oil and gas this evening. But as a fun fact, Kern County produces about 70% of the state's oil. So it's such a large amount of activity in just one small region of the state. Some quick steps that we share that you can use to protect yourself are to get familiar with the air quality index. This is a tool demonstrated on the top right again, that you can use, and I'll have someone drop the sjvair.com link. So this is a website where you can sign up on your phone and get alerts about the air in your area. This helps you kind of just guide some of the decisions you make. And generally when you have air on the green to yellow scale, or 0 to 100 scale, that's generally good air. Once you get to 100 to about 200, or this orange or red region, becomes extremely unhealthy. And as I mentioned, those sensitive groups, they may start feeling it in the 100 to 150 air quality region, but that can also happen even in the yellow regions. Anything past 200 is extremely unhealthy and hazardous, and you definitely want to avoid being in that air for too long. And some ways that we ask folks to adjust to the air quality once they get a hold of that information is to stay indoors, to make sure you're wearing a mask when you have to be outdoors, and to make sure you're changing your air filters, which can be in your car, in your home. And that's just one way to make sure you're filtering the air that is coming into places where you're breathing it in. We also encourage folks to report on Ivan Kern on kernreport.org. And this is something we'll help walk you all through later tonight. And finally, we also ask for folks to get involved and to give public comment about some of the issues you are facing when it comes to air quality. And valleyair.org is one of the websites where the regional air district posts workshops, and those are some places where you can get involved, but our organizations can also share some of that information as well. One resource that we do want to offer is an opportunity to get a free residential air purifier. This is a program that is run by the regional air district, and you would just input your address to see if you qualify. The application is available in English and Spanish. All you need to submit is a proof of residency, and this can be through an energy or an internet bill. So I will have someone drop that link as well if you are interested in that. And now that is kind of the 101 that we run through, and do want to shift over to talking about oil and gas context, starting with this snapshot of Kern County. And every circle that you see on this screen is a well that is located in Kern County, whether active, idle, or orphaned or abandoned. And we'll get into some of those terms a little bit later in the evening as well. So Kern County has been an oil and gas powerhouse since the 1890s, when oil was first discovered here in the region. And an annual report has come out of the American Lung Association, which has rated different counties based on their air quality, and Kern has definitely failed the standards for ozone and particulate pollution significantly. That has just been a consistent trend that we've seen, and that is largely due to some of the pollution that we see come from the oil industry. We often see that these operations are cited by targeted areas in our community. One study found that about 92% of those living within 1.5 miles of oil and gas drilling are people of color. So there is just a significant skew there of where these operations are being cited. Kern County, as well as the local air district, has been extremely supportive of a lot of the oil industry's efforts, and why we see such a large amount of operations in the county. One example of this is a few years ago, the county tried to pass an ordinance that would allow for about 40,000 new wells to be permitted over a 25-year period under one environmental impact report. And that is something that is very uncommon. Usually those impact reports happen with each group of wells or each group of projects. So this is something that was really trying to double down on scaling that infrastructure and maximizing profits, even if it went against public health. We've seen numerous studies of the impacts of oil and gas drilling, and they really wanted to scale it up. But I will pass it over to our partners at CRPE to get a little bit more into that context and share about the work that they do. So is Muddy Cruz or Juan?
Yeah, hi, I'm here. Hi, everyone. I'm Mari Cruz Ramirez. I am a community organizer with CRPE, the Center on Race, Poverty, and the Environment. And we are an organization whose work focuses on providing legal and organizing and technical assistance to grassroots groups in low-income communities and communities of color in the San Joaquin Valley. Our work ranges from oil and gas to pesticides and toxics in our environment, and working towards a just transition. And as mentioned earlier, the San Joaquin Valley is known for having the worst air pollution in the nation, as well as, having major water issues. And, our people here suffer horrible health effects such as cancer, asthma, and cardiovascular disease due to these problems. And, as disheartening as this information may be, we at CRPE believe that the people of San Joaquin Valley, have proven themselves to be resilient and powerful when it comes to gathering, people power and fighting for environmental justice. So we are, happy to be a resource for collective action. Next slide, please. Oh, wait, actually go back to the previous slide. Yeah, there you go. So as CRPE, we have a philosophy and believe that we must follow the lead of, community members, and that residents are the ones who should be leading conversations when it comes to, environmental issues that are affecting them and their communities. From participating in lobbying days in Sacramento, having meetings with state senators, representatives, to providing public comments during, official hearings. It's the residents who must be front and center when it comes to these fight and actions. And CRPE also believes in using social media and media in general to highlight the efforts and struggles faced by community members in order to spread awareness of the need for environmental justice. And one example is a short film that was produced in 2015 called growing resistance. And I put the link up here in case anybody would want to check it out later. And to make this film, which was about fracking and climate change in the San Joaquin Valley, CRPE partnered with, a media agency as well as another nonprofit org, just to, tell the story of how fracking and climate change and drought have affected people here in the San Joaquin Valley. Okay, next slide. Okay. So one of the community groups that CRP has worked with, and I believe some of them are on this call as well, Committee for a Better Arvin, they're the perfect example of how amazing things can be accomplished with people power and grassroots organizing. Because of their efforts, in 2018, Arvin became the first city in the entire state of California to pass a setback, which is, a barrier between oil projects and sensitive areas such as homes, schools, hospitals, and parks. For them, it was 300 feet for the setback for, I think, homes, and then 600 feet for other sensitive areas. And, this was, again, a huge deal because no other city had done it before in California. And this was really the first spark that lit the fire in which we are currently still, fighting in, which is, to get statewide setbacks. It's actually been, I think, exactly almost a year since Governor Newsom did sign a bill that was going to make setbacks a law, but after, a big fight with big oil and them pouring, millions and millions of dollars to pretty much fight setbacks and having a referendum to stop it, we are now gonna, have to revisit that fight in the next 2024, election. And it's gonna be up to the voters of California, to vote yes or no on setbacks. So this is definitely, a major project that CRPE will be working on for the rest of this year as well as 2024. And we only want to, use this to also empower the communities and really get them, ready to, get this fight done and to get them involved and informed. And yeah, that's all I have. I believe the CalGEM is next. Thank you all.
Thanks, Maricruz. And I'll go ahead and open up the CalGEM slides while folks get set up. We do have a group. They are a task force, so it is a large team that is working on this effort. Give me a second to do that.
Thanks, Yasmin. While you do that, I'll go ahead and introduce myself. Good evening, everyone. I'm Courtney Smith. I'm the Chief Deputy Director of CalGEM, which stands for the California Geologic Energy Management Division. We're a division within the Department of Conservation. As Yasmin mentioned, I'm joined by several colleagues from CalGEM, but also the California Air Resources Board. We are partnering on a few efforts we wanted to share with you this evening. Before we jump in, I just want to extend my appreciation. We're super grateful to be invited to share with you all today some of the efforts that we have underway to address concerns around oil and gas in Kern. But also importantly, we want to get your feedback to inform these efforts. So there's a couple points in our presentation where we'll maybe pause, and there's only a couple folks on the line, but just want to create some space in case folks have some feedback they'd like to give us on some key efforts. We're really looking forward to hearing from you on that. So with that, I'm going to hop right in, and I know Rohit and Jeanette on our end are going to present, and if folks have questions for CARB, I'll just ask folks to introduce themselves before they speak to speed things up if that works. So we can go to the next slide. So what we wanted to cover with you all is first who we are and what we do. Also give you a little background on the Methane Task Force that Yasmin referenced, give a little more context, and importantly, my colleague Jeanette is going to share with you how to use a tool that we often use, but we think would be useful for you all as well to better understand the landscape of oil and gas wells in Kern. Then we'll talk a little bit about a really exciting expanded program that we have to seal wells in communities. And I'll talk about wells that we're planning to seal in your community. Get a little feedback from you all on that. And then I'm going to kick it to my colleague Rohit. Rohit is my counterpart. He's the Deputy Director for Operations, so oversees all of CalGEM's inspection efforts and enforcement in some capacities as well. So he's going to talk about our inspection work in Kern County. And then we'll give folks an update on some joint inspections that we've been undertaking with both the Air Resources Board as well as San Joaquin Valley Air District. And then might be a little out of order at some point. We're gonna make sure folks are aware of, if you have concerns, who to call and how to get those concerns addressed. So with that, we can jump right in. And I think to start with, yeah, next one, lots of transitional slides. Awesome. Yeah, so just to start with, wanted to make sure folks know who CalGEM is. We are the state agency with regulatory authority over the drilling, operation, and the permanent closure of wells that are within the oil, gas, and geothermal industries in California. And our mission is to carry out this oversight while making sure we protect communities, public health, safety, and the environment. We can go to the next slide. I'm not going to spend a ton of time talking about how we're organized, but just, everyone here will get copies of these slides. Just wanted to, at a high level, make sure folks saw sort of the people working really hard on these issues. As I mentioned, I'm Courtney Smith. I'm overseeing our programs. That includes our regulatory programs. Importantly, I report to the State Oil and Gas Supervisor, as does my colleague Rohit. As I mentioned, Rohit oversees all field operations for the whole state. That includes Bakersfield, the Bakersfield office, where Rohit lives. So he's a neighbor. We could go to the next slide. I'm not going to go too much into this, just for your reference. This is an overview of the folks who work on my team and the kinds of work that we do, everything from environmental review of projects to carrying out the regulatory requirements for our underground injection control program, to overseeing underground gas storage facilities, just as a few examples. Next slide. And then lastly, as I mentioned, again, just to demystify a kind of complicated organizational structure, we're a division within a broader department. That department is headed by David Shabazian. His number 2 happens to be the acting state oil and gas supervisor right now. And importantly, Sarah Rubin. Many of you work with her often. She reports through the public affairs office within the larger department. So we can jump right in. Okay, so context setting. As Yasmin mentioned, we have formed a methane task force, but wanted to share a little bit about what promulgated that. So last year, Governor Newsom actually directed the formation of a task force really focused on identifying and addressing methane leaks from oil and gas infrastructure. We have formed a task force that includes the California Air Resources Board, the CalEPA, CNRA, and CalGEM. And really, the reason why there is such a focus on methane leaks from oil and gas is because it's a concern for several reasons. 1, methane's a potent greenhouse gas. 2, methane leaks from oil and gas infrastructure oftentimes are an indicator that the wells or the infrastructure may be in a state of repair, possibly unsafe, and needs to be fixed. And then also, lastly, while methane itself is not a toxic air contaminant, a leak could contain other types of gases, which raises important questions around public health. So you can go to the next slide. So as mentioned, these 4 agencies have come together because we all have important regulatory authority over methane and oil and gas production infrastructure. Next slide. And what we're focusing on are 2 kind of key objectives, sharing with the public progress that we have on efforts underway aimed at addressing methane leaks from oil and gas infrastructure, And then also just elevating opportunities for more engagement. Speaking of, I'm going to invite my colleague Jeanette to drop in the chat the link to our website for the Methane Task Force. That is everything you need to join a future quarterly meeting that we hold or to access historic meetings. We also have Q&A on there, questions and comments that we received, we respond to. So it's a real wealth of information. All right, let's keep going. Maybe I'll pause. I know we want to make sure we're interactive. Do anyone have any questions on who we are? Okay. We can maybe go to the next slide.
Yes, and I'll also just quickly prompt if you have questions, feel free to drop them in the Q&A and we can have those on queue to get to. Thanks.
Perfect. All right, I'm going to pass to Jeanette, who's going to share with you all a little bit more around what oil and gas infrastructure and wells are in Kern and how you can learn more about that.
Thank you, Courtney. And actually, I will be presenting in Spanish, así que muy buenas tardes a todos. Mi nombre es Janet Ochoa. Yo trabajo. Sí, así que ya les voy a dar un tiempo al intérprete, ya no lo necesitaré. Ok. Bueno, entonces les vamos a dar un resumen del total de número de pozos. Siguiente. Bueno, aquí les mostramos el diapositivo donde pueden apreciar el número total de pozos en el condado de Kern. En total hay 108,494 número de pozos. Se encuentran activos actualmente 33,988 con 20,322 pozos inactivos. Esto quiere decir que en los pasados 2 años no se han reportado actividad. Entonces, estos pozos son inactivos. Hay 52,780 pozos que actualmente están tapados. Y se encuentran 1,383 pozos que tienen el permiso de perforar, pero aún no lo han hecho. Entonces son permitidos, pero no hay actividad. Y el total de 22 pozos que actualmente se encuentran desconocidos. Okay. Próxima, por favor. Aquí se puede ver el número total, ¿verdad? Se ven los pozos que son activos. Están a lo largo de todo el condado de Kern. Y el próximo día diapositiva le mostraremos los que son actualmente no están activos. Entonces se encuentran similarmente, aproximadamente en la misma área que los pozos que están activos. Bueno, ahora yo les demostraré cómo pueden ustedes buscar estos pozos en la aplicación Well Finder. Es bastante sencillo. Sí pueden ver, perdón. ¿Pueden ver mi página? Perfecto. Lo primero es ir a la página principal del Departamento de Conservación. Una vez que estén en la página, van a ir a divisiones, donde se encuentra petróleo y gas, que representa CalGEM. Una vez en esta página, buscarán el Well Finder, que se llama el buscador de pozos. Y aquí les dará una explicación profunda de qué es Well Finder, de dónde vienen todos los datos. Pero bueno, entonces nosotros nos vamos a ir al icono de Well Finder para poder abrir la aplicación. Se toma un segundo. Ya que entren en la página, aquí les muestra un resumen de todo lo que pueden encontrar. Presionan OK. Bueno, En este momento nosotros estamos viendo el mapa en esta manera, pero aquí a la mano derecha van a encontrar un menú de opciones para poder ver el mapa. Nosotros vamos a escoger calles o streets y ayuda para poder localizar un poco mejor los pozos y qué tan cerca está de algunas calles que conozcamos. Muy bien, cerramos aquí. Y solo para que ustedes sepan, las líneas azules representan los distritos de CalGEM. Las pueden eliminar si prefieren para tener menos ruido. Bueno, ahora que tengan ya el mapa elegido, más o menos la zona, se van al icono de la lupa, mano izquierda, y similar al Google Maps, presionan, van a escoger el lugar o el sitio donde quieran visitar. Aquí tienen una lista de cómo buscar el pozo. Nosotros lo vamos a hacer por sitio o place. Entonces vamos a escoger un pueblo en Kern, Wasco, por ejemplo. Presionan search o vamos a buscar. Los lleva exactamente al pueblo de Wasco. Como pueden ver, hay varios círculos alrededor y exactamente como decía Jasmine, estos representan el número de pozos, ¿verdad? Cada pozo tiene su estatus. Entonces es importante saber qué representa el color de cada pozo. Para saber más sobre eso, aquí a la mano derecha tenemos una leyenda donde pueden ver qué representa el icono, el círculo verde, por ejemplo, son pozos que están activos. Los pozos rojos son pozos cancelados que en su momento tuvieron el permiso de perforaron y no hubo nada, son pozos secos. Los pozos de color morado son aquellos pozos que son inactivos. Por los últimos 2 años no se ha habido actividad. Y si llegan a ver los pozos grises, que son muy comunes también, esos pozos ya fueron tapados y sellados. Como les digo, aquí es bastante simple poder ustedes navegar este mapa. Los invitamos a que lo utilicen. Si tienen cualquier pregunta, pueden aquí mismo en el icono de información, hay cómo buscar o llamarnos a CalGEM, también el correo electrónico, y ya sea yo o alguien de CalGEM les ayude un poco más en cómo buscar pozos en esta aplicación. Gracias. Eso es todo por hoy.
Gracias, Jeanette. If we could pull up the slides, I'm going to continue and share with folks a little bit more on our expanded program aimed at permanently sealing orphan wells, as we have some really exciting developments there. As Yasmin mentioned, in Kern, oil and gas operations have been carried out for over 150 years. So there's a lot of wells that were drilled during that history that weren't sealed or plugged, and they're no longer belonging to an operator that's financially viable. So that is why I think, I don't know what slide it is. I think it's right on it. There you go. That is why recognizing that there are these orphan wells, the state and the feds have actually allocated recently unprecedented amount of money for us to be able to seal these wells. Also, I want to say before I jump into this, that oftentimes engineers, when they refer to sealing a well, they refer to it as plugging and abandoning it. It's a technical term. And it can be confusing. So we actually created a really accessible explanation that Jeanette graciously just dropped in the chat for what an orphan well is and how we go about sealing it. The reason why this is so important is because if wells aren't sealed, they can serve as a potential source of methane, creating a climate threat, or potentially other gases. It could serve as a potential conduit to waterways and also a physical hazard. So these wells pose risks to communities and the environment. It's something we're really focused on addressing. We've been spending a last year and a half working through a very rigorous public process to figure out how to prioritize these wells and which ones to focus on first. Excitingly, last month, we released our draft expenditure plan. It provides the framework for how we plan to spend the first chunk of the money. We can go to the next slide. As part of that plan, are proposing tackling 378 wells across the state. These were identified using a risk-based prioritization method, getting input from communities and local governments. We have more information on our website of the process we went through to identify these wells. But ultimately, this first phase, we're hoping to seal 378 wells. We think it'll be around $80 million. And importantly, 40% of that will be directly located within disadvantaged communities. Next slide. I wanted to dive in a little bit with you all and elevate, if you weren't aware, that we are, as part of that proposal, proposing to plug 83 wells in the Bakersfield area, 39 in Arvin Lamont, and then 6 in Kern County broadly. There is more detail online in our expenditure plan of exactly which wells those are, where they're located. So I'm going to ask Jeanette, if she doesn't mind, to drop the link in to our expenditure plan and state abandonment work, where you can find out more about the wells we're proposing to seal in your community. We did just close our public comment period, so we'll be reviewing those comments. I've heard we've got over 400. We'll taking a look at that, and based on that public feedback, tweaking our expenditure plan as needed and finalizing that hopefully in the coming months. And then we're going to start working on contracting to hire folks to come in and seal these wells. Next slide. So this is where I wanted to pause just to create space in case folks had some feedback they wanted to give us to inform this project. And there's 2 key areas actually that we could really benefit from your feedback on. The first one has to do with, basically getting a sense from you all as we move to carry out sealing these wells, if there might be any concerns or issues that you want to make us aware of. So in other words, I think we all agree that sealing these wells is the right thing to do for the environment, for our communities, and that, that's really a long-term benefit. But coming in and actually sealing them can create some short-term impacts, including for residents near their site. We're bringing big rigs in. There's going to be transportation and transit that's going in and out of the site. So just wanted to hear from folks if there are any concerns or issues in particular, that as we think about preparing to develop contracts and approaches for carrying out this work, if there's any concerns that you want to make sure we're aware of. So I'll pause to see if anyone has any thoughts. I guess, Yasmin, folks raise their hand or just unmute themselves if they have questions or comments they want to contribute.
Yeah, if any of the attendees want to raise their hand, then we can call on them. If not, feel free to also drop something in the Q&A. We can read that out.
Cool. And also too, we have another question here I'll maybe talk through while folks are thinking. So the other thing we were hoping to get some feedback on is, as I mentioned, this is just the first phase of wells we're proposing. We have and are planning to be able to spend more money. And so just wanting to ask folks if there are any wells that you're aware of that are not in our proposed list that you as a community might have concerns with, or you want to flag for our attention to consider for future phases of this work. Jeanette, if you wouldn't mind, I would like to offer up that if folks, have something they want to share later after today, we have an email where we're always accepting feedback. Thanks, Jeanette. You're great. You can email us at calgemorphanwells@conservation.ca.gov. with answers to these questions, other concerns or questions you may have, and we'll gladly get back to you and communicate with you around those. Okay, I'll just give it another second. I don't see any questions in the chat. Maybe we can move on to the next slide. All right, I'm going to kick it to my colleague Rohit to talk about our inspection program.
Thank you, Courtney. Good afternoon, everyone. Again, my name is Rohit Sharma, and I'm Chief Deputy of Operations with CalGEM. So I'm going to talk about CalGEM's Central District's inspection program, which covers Fresno, Tulare, Kings, and Kern counties within Central Valley. Inspections are a very important part of CalGEM's day-to-day work. Our inspectors go out daily to witness, test, and inspect wells, leases, and facilities. During inspections, if we encounter any violation, we then go ahead and issue a notice of violation to the operator and then conduct a re-inspection after the violation has been corrected. So the focus of these inspections is to protect public health and environment. In our Bakersfield office, we have a field engineering unit, and there are 5 different teams within the field engineering unit, and each team have a dedicated area to go out and inspect these tests and wells and leases. So what we look for when we go out and do our inspections for the well. So there are a number of things you can see on your screen, like a well sign that needs to have a well name, number, lease name, name of the operator, and emergency phone number. Whether there is any refuse or waste present around the well location, if the well is accessible, well should not be open to the surface, which create an there shouldn't be any weeds present, which could be a fire hazard. Whether the well cellar is free of any fluid, and whether there is a cover of the cellar. If the well is in the urban area, it should be adequately enclosed so that there is no open access to the well. The well should also not be leaking, and our inspectors check the wellhead components, pipelines when they do inspections. Next slide. So in 2022, we have performed over 50,000 inspections in the Central District, out of which 32,000 were environmental inspections. This includes 2,144 critical wells, which are located within 300 feet of communities and environmental sensitive areas, which include urban areas as well. We also send 589 violations to the operators for these wells. Next slide. So Central District's plan is to inspect all 2,558 critical and environmental sensitive wells and within the urban areas, and respond to any complaints from the public. So how do you call about these leaks? While the programs and the effort we just outlined are designated to help identify and address leaks from the active, idle, and orphan wells, which include methane leaks, the result of these programs may take time, and they cannot always find leaks immediately. So that is why we highly encourage members of public who do have immediate concern about gas leaks in their community to dial 911. This includes, for instance, if you hear leaking gas coming from the well or attendant facilities, if you might see a gas bubbling up within the cellar of the well, or if you feel like a seismic event that could have disrupted oil and gas infrastructure, please call 911 immediately. We also encourage folks who may smell gas to not only dial 911, but also call their local gas utilities. Since natural gas is a colorless and odorless, mercaptan is a foul-smelling gas that is added to the natural gas used within the homes to make it easier to detect. So if community members smell gas, they should call their gas utility immediately, as it may indicate that the leak in the homes or within the natural gas distribution system. And lastly, if the community members see black oil on they should report the spill to Office of Spill Prevention Response at the number provided on the screen. So community member may also have concern about the impact of oil and gas production on their local air quality and public health, and such can contact the local air district and public health department with those questions. Lastly, the community member may have a complaint about an operator or about oil and gas facilities in their community. CalGEM has set up a new dedicated website and process to receive and respond to the community complaints. Community member can submit their concern directly to the community concern at conservation.ca.gov. This email is checked by the representative within each district who can assist in addressing these issues. I'll hand it over to Courtney.
It's me again. I have. We can go to the next slide. So I wanted to give folks a brief update on a really important effort we have underway as part of the Methane Task Force. CalGEM and CARB has partnered with the Air District in order to work together on inspections and enforcement. This really helps us share our expertise and to coordinate our respective authorities. And so we have agreed to carry out joint inspections in areas that are for the AB 617 community steering committees that have identified as part of their community emission reduction plans, oil and gas wells as a concern. We are carrying out joint inspections in those areas. One thing I want to mention is these joint inspections are actually, they're in addition to the regular bread and butter inspection work that Rohit just talked about, CalGEM carrying out, and also CARB has its own growing enforcement team as well. So this is an additional effort above and beyond our additional our baseline inspection work. Next slide. So as part of this effort, we conducted a joint inspection back in May in the Arbonne and Lamont community. We inspected all active and idle wells that were within 3,200 feet of the boundaries of the community. We did find several leaks. Fortunately, we were able to have them all be repaired. You can find a lot more detail around the repairs that were made, the follow-up inspections, enforcement action taken in the link that's on the slide, and that Jeanette also just dropped in the chat. Importantly, throughout all of this, we provided written updates and met with the community to make sure that we were passing along information as quickly as we could, and also created this web page as well to make sure that we were communicating quickly with the community. Next slide. So we are also gearing up next week to carry out a second joint inspection effort in the Shafter community. We plan to inspect all active and idle wells within 3,200 feet of the Shafter boundary. So we're talking about 73 wells. When we go out to, it's not just the wells, we also look at the associated equipment that is on site to make sure that it complies with all laws and regulations. Next slide. Just quick map of the Shafter community boundary. I'm going to ask that we jump ahead because there I think is a better map. Perfect. So this shows all the critical and environmentally sensitive wells within 300 feet in the area. And then let's jump one more. Oh, that was it. Okay. So back up one, sorry. I just want to make one point. This shows the wells that are in the broad area. We're inspecting all the wells that are in the yellow box. Because I'm sorry, that's not entirely clear. We are inspecting all wells that are in the Shafter community. In addition, there is the I think it's a 7-mile boundary around, and all of the critical wells in that area we are inspecting. So that's how we get to 73. A critical well is a well that's near a road, near people, near a waterway. So those are ones where you know, we have greater cause for concern if there's a leak because they're potentially near people. Next slide. Or 2 slides. Cool, thanks. One thing, wanted to share some great feedback we got from community members after and during the ARB and Lamont inspection effort. We're addressing in the Shafter joint inspection effort. An important one is having a community notification plan. We have been working, and along with the Air District and CARB, all of us have been working to coordinate with the local emergency personnel, and in particular, the Kern County Fire Department and the Certified Unified Program Agency, CUPA, to be able to make sure we're all on the same page with when we would call first responders about leaking oil wells when there's cause for concern. And then also making sure that they are prepared, they know we're doing this inspection, should they, in their professional judgment, deem it necessary to notify community members because there's concerns of like immediate safety concerns. They are trained to do that, and so we'll be relying on them. Another thing we're going to be doing as part of our community notification is posting all of our inspection information by the end of the next day. So that way we can give folks real time or as close to real time information on what we're finding. Oftentimes our inspectors are out in the field all day, so it does take some time to come back, digest that information, type it up, send it out, those sorts of things. But we're committing to posting that information by the following day of each day of the inspection. And then lastly, as we did during the Arvin Lamont inspection, we will be providing the community written email updates after the inspection concludes on progress for repairing any leaks found. Next slide. An additional thing as well that we are planning to do as part of this inspection effort is CARB is planning to assist with carrying out a sampling plan. So this includes tracking how methane dissipates from the leaking wells to determine the distance when methane goes to background, but then also importantly, taking gas samples from some of the leaking wells to be able to analyze them so we understand what the co-constituents might be in each leak, and of course, sharing that information with the community. Next slide. That's the image I thought that I was getting. Okay, this is great. This shows the wells that we are inspecting as part of our joint inspection. Okay, next slide. Same one, keep going. All right, next steps on our joint inspection. We're going to carry it out next week. So I'm very much looking forward to that. And as mentioned, we'll be providing those post-inspection updates to the Shafter community, and the website that Jeanette dropped in the chat is a way that folks can also access that information. Next slide. Cool. Okay, this was another area we're hoping to get some feedback from folks if you have it. So this is more broadly just around how we can best engage with communities throughout Kern. So as mentioned, we do regularly attend both the AB 617 Arvin Lamont and also the Shafter Community Steering Committee meetings. given that those are both CSCs that have identified oil and gas wells as a concern for their local air quality. In addition, we attend the IVAN meeting. We also host quarterly Methane Task Force meetings and also additional workshops on key topics. So there is a lot that lots of opportunity to engage. I think one thing we were wondering is if there's any other, through these venues, if there's any other efforts related to oil and gas that folks might like to learn about. It could inform potential future agendas. So we're making sure that we're covering the things people are interested in covering. And of course, we're always open to that feedback. I mean, of course, Yasmin, again, really appreciate you reaching out and requesting us to share in this venue, and look forward to any future opportunities that there might be to continue the conversation with communities in the Kern area.
Yes, no, thank you for joining tonight, and we will put all the questions on the slides. I can drop those in the chat later towards the community discussion piece when I do stop the recording. Maybe that will help some comfort levels in terms of sharing, and then
Fair
also
enough.
plan to reshare those questions in other spaces and get things back to you as I hear from community members myself.
That would be great. I think that's it for us.
Perfect. And next up, we have CCEJN. So I'll pass it over to Cesar, and I'll get your slides up in a moment here. If you want to start introducing yourself.
Yes, hello everyone. My name is Cesar Aguirre. I work with the Central California Environmental Justice. Excuse me, I had to clear my throat. Much like CRPE, CCEJN is focused around environmental justice, and our mission is really to empower communities and help secure a future for children that is free of negative environmental impacts in low-income communities and communities of color in the Central Valley. And this is specifically important to us because, as we've seen and as Jasmine mentioned earlier, with issues like oil and gas development, 92% of the people that live within 1 mile of oil and gas development are people of color. So here at CCEJN, we focus on environmental justice, and we run the IVAN network, which is a tool that we have where we can make reports, and a lot of the regulators that are here on the meeting chat, and where they talk about community issues. So I'll pass it to my colleague Ileana so she can chat a little bit about what IVAN is, and then how to make a report. And then I'll talk a little, I'll give an example of what one of those reports look like. So if we can go to the next slide, I'll pass it on to Ileana.
Hello, everyone. So IVAN Kern is an interactive way for residents to report environmental issues, whether it is illegal dumping or a gas leak that you smell or that you fear will be in any way effective to your health. We also focus on connecting you all with the right people and agencies that can help alleviate this issue. And each report is reviewed and forwarded to those agencies once you make it. You can make this report through call or text or through the website that is coming on the next slide, I believe. Yeah, so once you're on this website, and I think Catherine sent this in the chat as well, but you can go on the website and submit a report through here. You could do it anonymously. You don't have to submit it with your name on it or any description about yourself, just where the address where this is at, and maybe the category and the title, as well as the date. You can also call the number. A lot of people feel more comfortable calling or texting this in, since sometimes it is a little bit harder to get on the web if you're out or you don't have a computer available. So please feel free to call the number instead if you feel more comfortable with that.
Thank you so much for that, Eliana. Yeah, and this is one example of why community reports are important. This was from a spill that was reported in February, or in early March, actually. It happened in February. And if you could go ahead and play it, I can talk a little bit about what this is afterwards. So what's happening here is after there was oil that leaked on the ground from wellhead and oil operation that was happening there, they being the company that was at fault, Sequoia Explorations, covered up their oil spill with dirt, which is very illegal and very unethical, especially when this is happening right next to where people live and right next to an organic farm, right? So through the IVAN network, we're able to collect this type of evidence and share it with regulators. And through our monthly IVAN Task Force meeting, which is the first Tuesday of every month, the regulators are all at the table. And that really makes sure that these types of reports don't fall through the cracks, because while this was first reported to our local air district, there is an exemption that they had to enforce a rule that comes through CARB, which is the state methane rule. So things like the IVAN Task Force allow these reports to live on a list where we can follow up on them and make sure that the right regulator is having access to this type of community engagement and enforcement that we really need, right? Because if it wasn't for the IVAN network, we wouldn't have received this type of evidence of illegal activity being used to cover up a spill. So this is one of the main reasons why IVAN is a very important platform, and making sure that we have these types of community reports, make sure that sites like these, which has been an issue since early February, gets dealt with very quickly, because this was reported to us in early July, and before the end of the month, the operator had fully plugged the well. So really appreciate all of the teamwork that went into that with a lot of the regulators that are here. And if we could go to the next slide. This is the FLIR project. The FLIR project is something that our organization is undergoing, where we have a camera that sees basically gas leaks, right? Wherever there's gas coming out of operations or oil and gas development, we'll be able to monitor those and inspect those at a fence line level and report those through the IVAN network, so that we can make sure that any neighborhood leaks are found and reported. So this is what the camera looks like, and this is a picture that was taken of me during our first team inspection. So if you could go to the next slide. One more. Show it. There we go. So this is what video from the FLIR camera looks like. And we'll see this is when it kicks into what's called high sensitivity mode. We'll see all of the pollutants coming off of these stacks and this production. And this was a leak that we found in a refinery called the Kern Energy Refinery. It was a leak that we were already aware of through an IVAN report, and a leak that had been going on for months. So because we had this FLIR footage and we were able to point the air district in the right direction, they were able to take their FLIR camera and find the leak and tell the operator, and they were able to deal with this leak. And it's still under investigation, but because it's still under investigation, it's on our IVAN Task Force meeting, right? So in this next slide, if you could go to the next slide, a lot of those gases, like Rohit said, they don't have a scent, some of them do. So if you feel any of these symptoms or smell any of these, smells like something sulfuric, or smells like rotten egg, or if you have any symptoms like headaches, lightheadedness, or nausea, and you have those symptoms and smell those things, please make a report to 911 immediately, and take advantage of those resources that Rohit shared earlier. So that is the main focus, and the first priority of our organization is public health and public safety. And a lot of these leaks that happen near neighborhoods, we want to make sure that people are aware of them. So making sure that people are aware of the symptoms and the smells are one of the best ways to have communities that live next to these, sites that produce a lot of contamination and pollutants that affect health can be aware of to make these types of reports. Thank you.
Thank you, Cesar and Eliana. And now I'll pass it over to Kobe to introduce himself.
I was muted, sorry. Hi, everyone, Kobe here. I currently serve as the Coalition Coordinator of Vision, or Visión, and I'll be talking a little bit about the setbacks and protection zones that Maricruz mentioned a little bit earlier. Hola a todos, me llamo Kobe, ahora trabajo con Visión, la coalición que lucha para zonas de protección aquí en California, y voy a hablar un poco más de eso. CVAQ is a part of the Vision Coalition, as well as many other community-based organizations. And yeah, we formed a couple of years ago simply because there was no group of people other than us who were really pushing for the solutions that our community knows, which is a distance between where extraction happens and where we live and when we go to school, where we work to keep our communities safe. And so a couple of years later, we've had some big victories, and now we're still fighting to achieve setbacks, which right now would be a 1 kilometer distance between extraction sites and then those sensitive sites I mentioned before, like homes and schools. And next slide, please. So there's several reasons why we need to pursue setbacks and why we're fighting on behalf of our community for these setback zones. The first is that we know oil and gas extraction in California is a racial justice issue. It's no secret that oil and gas wells are overwhelmingly placed in low income and non-white communities, which means that the people who suffer the harms, both the short-term harms like Cesar was talking about, when you feel nausea or you have nosebleeds or your kids have asthma attacks, with the long-term harms, which is what happens to our bodies after being exposed to the toxins of extraction over many, many years. This is overwhelmingly happening in non-white communities across California. And another reason why we're fighting for setbacks is because we know more and more studies have shown that proximity and living close to extraction sites especially leads to adverse health for people who are pregnant. It can lead to low birth weight children and complicated pregnancies that put in danger the life of the person pregnant and the child. And then lastly, it's an environmental justice issue. You know, at Visión and CCEJN and CVAQ and all of the organizations that work together in our coalition, we know that nobody should have to suffer any of these health consequences simply because of their zip code, because of how they look, or because of the place that they live in, whether it's an apartment or a home, all of these things. And that's why we've been fighting to get setbacks. And then I'll tell you a little bit more about the story so far on the next slide. So upcoming in 2024, as Maricruz mentioned, we have a ballot measure. This is the law that we'll be voting on to keep our community safe. Over the past couple of years, Visión and our allies and our community members, the residents who live on the front lines of oil and gas, have been working for many years to pass a historic law that finally bans extraction within 1 kilometer of homes and schools. So this would mean that all new permits going out would be illegal and they would stop. This means that over the course of a couple years and a couple decades, we would see the end to all new permitting and all new extraction within the setback zone, like close to where we live in our neighborhoods. We passed that law last year, and it was one of the most exciting moments to be with everyone and to have that win. But Big Oil made sure that it was a short-lived victory. And like Maricruz mentioned, they worked really hard and spent millions of dollars in just 2 months to make sure that it's being voted on in 2024. So in a little more than a year from now, in November 2024, when everyone goes to vote, you'll have the chance to vote to keep the law and protect our communities. And so from now until then, Visión, which is a coalition that CVAQ and CCEJN and many other community-based organizations are part of, not just in the Valley, but also in the greater LA area, we're going to be working hard on educating not just our community members, but the public at large, and especially some important decision makers about why this law is important, why it's necessary that we end neighborhood drilling. And we're going to keep fighting to hold agencies and decision makers accountable going into that vote. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to connecting with all of you guys more. And it's always nice when we get the chance to communicate directly to residents who are living near oil and gas extraction. And yeah, I'm excited for this new part of our work. I'll pass it now back to Jasmine.
Thanks, Kobe, and thanks to all of our presenters this evening. We definitely covered a lot of the different landscape pieces with oil and gas, as there were 3 of our organizations that were really just able to dive into some of our work. There are many more organizations doing that work in the San Joaquin Valley and throughout the state, as well as just having introduction to the task force and learning about some of the agency work that is moving forward. And at this point, I do want to open it up to community discussion, and I'll go ahead and stop the recording, and we'll be posting this on our social medias so that way more folks can get a hold of the updates that we shared tonight. But do want to just now have a space to talk to folks that are on this call.